Deep beneath Europe's soil lie secrets the world was never meant to uncover. Bunkers built by the Nazis not just for war, but for twisted experiments, forgotten rituals, and chilling operations that defy explanation. Sealed and buried for decades, these places were designed to vanish from history. Yet some have returned to the surface, whispering their horrors back into the world. What were they hiding, and why does something inside still seem alive? This is what they tried to erase. In the dense forests of northeastern Poland lies a ruin that once echoed with the most sinister commands of the 20th century. The Wolf's Lair, Adolf Hitler's military headquarters during Operation Barbarossa. Bombed by retreating German troops in 1945 to prevent its capture, much of the compound was reduced to twisted steel and shattered concrete. But not everything was destroyed. In the summer of 2019, a team of Polish historians and archaeologists embarked on a quiet mission to map the substructures beneath the lair, part of a European historical preservation project. Using ground-penetrating radar, they discovered a sealed subterranean level, a rectangular anomaly beneath one of the lesser-known administrative bunkers. It wasn't marked on any known plans. After obtaining clearance and sponsorship from the Institute of National Remembrance, the team began excavation. 3 meters of soil and reinforced concrete separated them from the hidden chamber. What they found would be kept classified for months. The chamber was pristine, hermetically sealed. A heavy steel door, marked only with a black sun symbol and the numbers 7-22, led into a corridor illuminated by yellowed but still functional bulbs. The air inside was strangely dry. The walls were lined with white ceramic tiles, and the temperature remained at a consistent 17 degrees Celsius. Inside were 4 rooms. The first contained rows of iron beds, each with leather restraints affixed to the sides. Above every bed was a small, rectangular mirror. But when the team inspected the mirrors, they noticed something odd. The glass was not ordinary. When touched, it vibrated faintly, as if humming. Initial tests later revealed the surfaces were made from an experimental crystalline compound not found in any military documentation. The second room held journals. Hundreds of them, meticulously stacked on metal shelves. Written in stiff, neat German, the pages described trials involving sleep deprivation, memory manipulation, and dream control. Project Lebensnacht, or Night of Life, was detailed extensively. The SS wanted to create soldiers who no longer needed rest, humans who could act purely on command, day and night, without emotion or fatigue. One journal, belonging to an SS doctor named Friedrich Kopp, became the focal point. His entries turned disturbing. He described patients screaming about reflections that stare back. One subject, a captured partisan, allegedly died of a heart attack after spending 4 hours in a room with a mirror turned toward him. Kopp noted that something observed him from the other side. The third room contained only one object, a large, circular mirror embedded into the wall, surrounded by black curtains and ancient Germanic runes. A chair sat in front of it, bolted to the floor. Electrodes dangled from the ceiling, and beneath the mirror, a drawer revealed dozens of old film reels and a projector. One reel, when restored and viewed, showed experiments in progress. In the grainy footage, a man, possibly Dr. Kopp, asks a subject to describe what he sees in the mirror. The man hesitates, then begins to sob. "She's behind the glass," he says. "She's screaming my name." The feed cuts off abruptly as lights flicker and a scream pierces the audio track. The final room was an incinerator. Its design was modern for the time, advanced airflow, chemical disposal, and temperature controls. The logs beside it listed over 43 names, all subjects with coded identifiers. None had survived more than a week in the experimental program. Some entries ended simply with the phrase, "reflected beyond recovery." Polish authorities attempted to quietly suppress the finding, citing national security and diplomatic concerns. But in January 2021, 2 members of the original excavation team went public with photographic evidence and copies of some journal pages. Both disappeared within weeks. The Institute denied involvement. Since then, the entrance to Bunker 7-22 has been resealed with armed guards and motion sensors, ostensibly for public safety. Still, Stories emerge. A nearby villager claimed to hear muffled cries from beneath the forest floor late at night. A tourist guide once found a mirror shard outside the perimeter fence, which vibrated in her hand before cracking. Locals now call the forest Lustro Lesu, the Mirror Woods. They warn children not to play near the ruins. One whispered warning remains consistent among them: don't look too long. It might look back. High in the Austrian Alps, just beyond the reach of ski resorts and well-trodden hiking trails, lies a region known to locals as Toteniais, dead ice. Covered in a year-round glacier and subject to fierce winds, few venture there. But during World War II, the Nazis built something beneath it. Something they thought would never be found. In late 2020, climate change began to eat away at the glacier. A glaciologist named Dr. Ingrid Meyer led a research team to study melt patterns when her equipment registered an anomaly: perfectly geometric shadows beneath the ice. Further thermal scans revealed a solid structure buried at least 20 meters deep. It was no natural formation. Digging was treacherous. But by March 2021, a rusted steel hatch emerged from the glacier's throat. Stamped upon it was an insignia long buried in the past, a swastika encased within a triangle, unusual for standard military designs. The hatch was frozen shut, its hinges seized with age. It took 3 days of heating and leverage to pry it open. What lay inside came to be known as the Cold Vault. The corridor descended steeply, more like a tunnel than a hallway, lined with insulated metal plates that somehow resisted decades of corrosion. The temperature inside was just above freezing, unnaturally maintained without any active machinery. As the team descended, the air grew denser. Their breath crystallized. Radios began to crackle. The bunker opened into a vast underground chamber, seemingly carved into the ice itself. Shelves lined every wall, stacked with metal canisters, film reels, and handwritten ledgers. The walls themselves were embedded with what looked like pipes, but instead of water or gas, they appeared to house wiring, ending in projection lenses bolted into the ceiling. The ledgers catalogued each item in obsessive detail: Film 091B, Procedure 12, Aryan Hypnosis Trial, Canister 32, Audio Stimulation Phase 1, Subject A, Female. None of the listed items appeared in any known Nazi archival references. This wasn't just storage, it was documentation. But what truly disturbed the team were the films. Against all warnings, Dr. Meyer insisted on playing one. The footage was silent, grainy, but unmistakably real. A man in SS uniform addresses the camera before stepping aside, revealing a naked man strapped to a table beneath a bright, overhead light. Over the next 5 minutes, different sound frequencies, rising and falling, are played from a speaker. The subject begins to twitch, then convulse, then scream. The logbook beside the reel summarized the experiment. Subject entered trance state at 17.5 Hz. Eye movement ceased. Began speaking in foreign tongues. Claimed to see lights under the ice. Session terminated due to myocardial rupture. The deeper the team ventured, the more disturbing the contents. They discovered photographs of children, some with electrodes on their heads, others sitting in dark rooms staring at images of mutilation, death, and bizarre religious iconography. Each photograph was labeled with results: empathy levels reduced, crying ceased after 48 hours, subject requested more. In one corner of the chamber was a sealed, glass-fronted room containing a single metal chair surrounded by mirrors and light projectors. On the wall was written, in German, "See what we have seen. Feel what we made them feel." But the most horrifying discovery was behind a locked iron door labeled Kammer Null, Chamber 0. Breaking the lock required heavy equipment, and what lay beyond defied all reason. It was a morgue, rows of frozen corpses, perfectly preserved. Some wore uniforms. Others wore nothing at all. Their faces were twisted in agony, their eyes open, lips curled mid-scream. Autopsy tags revealed most had died in 1944. And then they found her. In a small, coffin-like pod near the far end of the room was the body of a woman, hair neatly braided, dressed in a white hospital gown. Unlike the others, Her body showed no signs of pain or decay. Her eyes were closed. One hand held a small notebook, the other rested against her heart. The notebook read like a confession. They said my voice could control minds, that my scream could shatter resistance. I screamed until they believed me. Then they made me stop. I am cold now, but I still hear them. They whisper through the walls. They whisper in the ice. Fearing political fallout, the Austrian government ordered the entire site reburied with concrete and snow. The press release spoke only of a historic refrigeration site from the war era. But before it was sealed, Dr. Meyer and 2 of her team members uploaded snippets of the footage to a hidden darknet archive. Weeks later, one of the assistants was found dead in his apartment. The official cause: heart failure. But his computer screen was still on, frozen on a frame from one of the vault's videos, a woman's eyes wide open, staring through the screen. Her mouth was open, mid-scream. The French port town of Lorient is a quiet place today, a haven for tourists drawn by its coastal charm and maritime history. But beneath the waves and concrete remnants of its World War II past lies a decaying monument to a darker era, the Lorient submarine base. Built by the Nazis as one of their most fortified U-boat pens, its massive bunkers were considered indestructible by Allied bombing runs. After the war, most of the site was abandoned, except for one section, locked and unrecorded in French or German archives. It was known only by rumors and a codename whispered by former German engineers, Bunker 13. For decades, Bunker 13 was dismissed as legend, a phantom floor plan, a conspiracy theorist's obsession. That changed in 2022, when a team of marine engineers working on an underwater maintenance project reported strange sonar echoes coming from an area thought to be solid rock. The echoes, long, hollow, and rhythmic, led them to a steel wall submerged under layers of rusted debris. Once cleared, they found an entrance, a corroded hatch leading into an airtight chamber submerged in brackish water. With authorization from the French Ministry of Culture and Defense, the hatch was breached. A diving team entered. What they surfaced with was something no one expected: human remains. Twisted bodies still in uniform, frozen in positions of apparent terror, mouths open as if screaming. One diver claimed he saw movement in the dark, as if shadows shifted just outside his flashlight beam. His camera captured nothing, only a black mist hanging in the air like smoke. The chamber led into a deeper tunnel, drained and pressurized from the inside, suggesting someone, or something, had kept it sealed long after the war. As the team moved forward, they encountered what looked like a communication center. Desks, broken typewriters, and radios littered the space, along with hundreds of audio tapes. The walls were covered in black acoustic foam, and the ceiling bore cryptic, chalk-scrawled words. Nicht sprechen. Nur hören. Do not speak. Only listen. One of the tapes, restored later in a sound lab, began with silence, then a man's voice in German. Initiating Operation Dämmerung. Awaiting contact. Then came a sound, faint at first, like wind through a pipe. Then rising into a hum. Then a whisper. Dozens of voices speaking simultaneously, some recognizable, some not, many overlapping in multiple languages: Russian, French, English, and something unidentifiable. A sound engineer who reviewed the file claimed to hear his dead wife's voice clearly calling his name. He resigned the next day and left no forwarding address. Further exploration revealed a chamber deeper underground. Inside was a massive cylindrical structure, what appeared to be a pressure vessel, like those used in early reactor prototypes. Around it were skeletal remains of German officers, some with pistols in hand, each having shot themselves. A dusty file on a nearby table contained handwritten notes, marked, Top Secret, Führer-level clearance. The first page was titled, Operation Dämmerung. Final stage, psychological disruption of Allied coastlines via deep-frequency bombardment. Activation requires human resonance. Attached to the file was a photograph dated 1944. It showed 6 men standing in front of the pressure vessel, saluting. At the center stood a woman in a hospital gown, her mouth open in a silent scream, with cables attached to her temples. The vessel's interior was eventually opened, revealing a rusted metal chair bolted to the floor, surrounded by circular panels of glass. Scratched into the steel floor were the words, "Wir sind das Echo." We are the Echo. After the vessel was opened, strange occurrences began. The lead diver, who had entered the vessel alone, began to suffer from night terrors. He reported hearing voices in his home, always muffled, as if underwater. He claimed one night, while half asleep, a cold hand touched his shoulder and whispered, "We're still here." Weeks later, he went missing. His body was never found. But on his kitchen table was a recorder playing a continuous loop of one phrase. "They told us the war is over. But down here, it never ends." The French government sealed the site immediately. Official reports cited toxic gas exposure and risk of structural collapse. All recovered materials were classified. But someone leaked one of the audio files online, claiming it was from Bunker 13. The file lasted 13 minutes and sounded like static, until minute 11. At that point, a deep voice whispers a single sentence, in perfect English. "You've heard us now. We'll hear you next." Audio experts who analyzed the clip found a background frequency that didn't match any known natural or artificial pattern. It was as if the echo had a voice of its own. They called it a residual signature. But others now refer to it simply as Black Echo. The Pinsk marshes in southern Belarus stretch endlessly across boggy landscapes, forests, and winding rivers. During World War II, the area served as a natural barrier, used by both Soviet partisans and Nazi forces for cover, sabotage, and hidden installations. After the war, Soviet troops buried or dismantled nearly all German military infrastructure in the region. At least, that's what history said. Until 2023, when a group of schoolchildren from a nearby village, exploring the woods during an unusually dry spring, discovered something strange, a rusted steel vent protruding from the earth. It was barely visible through the overgrowth, but one of the boys, attempting to pry it open, fell into a sinkhole and landed in what appeared to be a man-made tunnel. Local authorities arrived and quickly cordoned off the site. But before the bunker was sealed, one of the children's phones uploaded a blurry video online. It showed a narrow corridor lined with red wires, and a voice, barely audible, repeating in distorted Russian, "Do not speak. Do not listen. Do not echo." The site, buried beneath decades of forest growth, turned out to be an underground Nazi listening post. The official designation etched above the main door was Funkstelle Rot 7, Signal Station Red 7. According to scattered Wehrmacht records, it was part of a Nazi effort to intercept and manipulate Soviet radio traffic. But what Red 7 was actually doing went far beyond espionage. The interior was in an eerie state of preservation. Maps, logbooks, broken headsets, and banks of vacuum tube radios lined the walls. One room contained over 200 audio reels, catalogued by date, frequency, and target origin. But there was a discrepancy. Many of the recorded frequencies weren't Soviet. They weren't even human. The deeper the investigators went, the more unexplainable the place became. A padded room held nothing but speakers facing inward. In the center sat a metal chair with a voice receiver mounted in front of it. When powered by a portable generator, the system activated instantly, despite being over 80 years old. A researcher sat in the chair as an experiment. The team broadcast a neutral Soviet weather report through the speakers. But the room reacted. The lights flickered, and instead of an echo, the report repeated, but altered. The voice now said, "Rainfall expected in Sector 12. They are listening from the dark. The silence is red." Terrified, they shut off the machine. When questioned later, the researcher said he'd heard another voice, one not broadcast, but whispered directly into his ear. "You opened it. Now we hear you." Even stranger was the central archive room, which contained Soviet uniforms hung on pegs, labeled with dates post-dating Germany's surrender. One was marked June 1946. Another had a name tag, Lieutenant K. Zhukov. A missing persons report from Soviet records confirmed such a lieutenant had vanished in the region during post-war mop-up operations. His body never recovered. Alongside the uniforms were files, transcripts of intercepted transmissions. Most were mundane, but occasionally a pattern emerged. A repeated phrase across dozens of documents, spoken in different languages, by different voices. Red silence knows. Red silence hears. In a locked cabinet labeled Restricted, Level Epsilon, they found an unmarked black reel. No case. No labeling. Despite warnings, it was played. The audio began with static, then a woman's voice in German, trembling. They told me to read from the script. But the words changed. I heard my mother calling from the speaker. She died 2 years ago. It's not a frequency. It's a mouth. Then screaming. And then a deep, low hum that built steadily. Audio engineers later reported that the frequency matched the human brain's theta wave state, associated with sleep, hypnosis, and hallucination. Some in the research team began experiencing strange dreams. One technician woke up screaming in Russian, though he only spoke French. Another reported hearing whispers from his radio at home, even when unplugged. One of the linguists transcribed whispered messages that weren't captured in the original recordings. The final message translated to, "We do not need transmitters anymore. You carry us now." Within weeks, the entire site was shut down by Belarusian military authorities. Official reports claimed chemical contamination, and all foreign researchers were expelled. But in the nearby village of Stolen, locals began to report strange interference in electronics. Radios flickered on during the night. Old speakers emitted static even when disconnected. A boy claimed to hear his deceased grandfather's voice in his headphones, warning him, "Tell them to stop listening, or we will speak again." As recently as February 2025, hikers reported finding fragments of Soviet-era radios buried under trees, still warm to the touch. One fragment had a phrase etched crudely into the metal. Red silence never stopped. It simply waited. One local legend says if you stand in the woods near the ruins at night, you can hear a radio voice saying your name, spoken softly, in a voice from your past. Those who've heard it say the same thing. The voice sounds exactly like someone you loved, but the words are not theirs. In the dying months of World War II, as Berlin burned and Allied forces closed in, the Nazis initiated desperate, last-ditch operations, projects hidden not only in location but in intention. One such program was code-named Schlafraum, or the sleeping room. Unlike other secret projects centered on weapons or chemical research, this one involved consciousness, time, and memory. The facility was built deep beneath the Harz Mountains in Germany, disguised as an abandoned or mine. For decades, it was considered lost. No maps, no trails, only rumors of strange disappearances in the region and unsettling local folklore. Of ghost lights in the woods, people waking with no memory of where they'd been, and the legend of Die Still Gast, the silent guests. In the spring of 2024, a team of hikers stumbled across a long-forgotten cave mouth after a landslide exposed a collapsed rock wall. Inside, they found heavy steel doors marked with radiation warnings and faded German military stamps. A small red plaque hung above the entrance. Project, Schlafraum, nur die Vergessenen dürfen eintreten. Project, Sleeping Room, only the forgotten may enter. Emergency services were called. The site quickly attracted attention from historians and military researchers. Once inside, they discovered the facility had power, faint but active. Emergency lights glowed red in the darkness. A central hallway led to multiple rooms labeled by number and designation: observation, calibration, containment. In room 4, they found beds, rows of them, neatly aligned. Each was attached to a strange machine resembling an MRI scanner crossed with a radio transmitter. A headset was affixed to every pillow. On a nearby desk sat a leather-bound book filled with names. Some names were crossed out. Others had notes like, "Did not wake, voice changed," or "Subject vanished." One chamber was marked, "Active Sleep Trial." Inside was a single bed occupied by a mummified corpse in full SS uniform. The subject's eyes were open, unblinking. Electrodes on his temples still pulsed with low voltage. His hand clutched a journal, and written in the final entry were the words, "It is not sleep. It is crossing. And on the other side, they are waiting." In the main laboratory, reels of film and documentation described the horrifying scope of the project. According to files stamped Himmler, personal eyes only, the sleeping room was meant to train human consciousness to separate from the body, projected not into dreams, but into a hidden dimension the Nazis referred to as Gedankenfeld, the thought field. The process involved total sensory deprivation, sustained white noise, and induced comas using experimental sedatives. Subjects were encouraged to walk past the veil during extended sleep cycles. Their experiences were recorded on wax cylinders, then later transcribed. Many transcripts devolved into incoherence, ramblings, screaming, or references to non-existent places. But some documents were chillingly clear. Subject 022 claims to have encountered a black sun surrounded by 6 men wearing masks of bone. When asked their names, they each said the same word, Wachter. Guardians. Subject 009 attempted to wake but failed. Heartbeat stopped for 3 minutes, then resumed. Upon awakening, subject could not speak. Began writing symbols unknown to our language. Symbols match markings found in Himmler's Wheelsburg rituals. A separate file detailed a terminal phase of the project, Operation Tiefenschlaf, or deep sleep. It was a one-way test, to see if a sleeper could stay within the thought field indefinitely and communicate from there. The operation had only one test subject, SS Hauptsturmführer Karl Bechtel. Bechtel's body was never recovered, but his bed remained perfectly preserved, untouched by time. The headset still buzzed with low-frequency signals. The machines around it hummed quietly, as though still awaiting his return. And then something happened. During a live power test, the researchers monitored room SIX's sleeping device, Bechtel's. As soon as the power surged, all lights in the facility dimmed. Every speaker emitted a whisper. No words, just sound. Except one speaker. A voice emerged, speaking in low, slow German. "The walls are thin now. You left the door open. I remember your face." The team cut power. But later, a technician reviewing the recording played it back at 4 times the speed. The voice continued. "You do not dream. You are remembered. In here, memory is not yours. It is us. It is always us." From that moment forward, several of the team began reporting memory lapses. One man could no longer remember his daughter's face. Another woman forgot her native language. One researcher claimed he never went into the bunker at all, though surveillance footage clearly showed him entering and staying inside for 6 hours. In a final, desperate attempt to close the site, the German government ordered the bunker collapsed. Explosives were rigged, and the entrances sealed. 3 days later, a phone rang inside a small museum in the nearby town of Bad Lauterberg. The museum had recently acquired artifacts from the bunker, including one of the wax cylinder recorders. According to the curator, the phone hadn't been connected in years. But it rang, and when answered, a voice said, "We are still sleeping. But you are forgetting. You are forgetting what we were." The line went dead. And on the table beside the wax recorder, written in condensation across the glass case, was a message in perfect German. "Wir sind Erinnerung." We are memory. That message has since faded, and the wax cylinder was removed from display. But workers at the museum claim sometimes, just before closing, they hear something, just below the threshold of hearing. A hum. A breath. And in it, the faint echo of a voice not quite human. Every case adds a new layer of mystery, leaving more questions than answers. Which one lingers in your mind, and what's your take on what really happened?